we're going to run into serious calls where we're going to have fatalities and injuries. They're going to hit us hard sometimes. Where do you think we need to go with these guys coming back?
Well, first off, as someone who has been through some bad calls in his lifetime, the worst, of course, was 9/11. And at 9/11, I lost quite a few friends. And I remember a couple of months after that, I was home. I was with my family. My daughter, my little angel, was 6, going to be 7. And she came up and she looked at me and she said, "Daddy, how come you're always angry?" And it was a kick in the stomach to me. I mean, it hurt. I get emotional just thinking about it. And I knew then, I talked to my wife and she said, "You know, the girls are scared of you." And my daughters were scared of me. And I had to go into counseling. I went into counseling and met a former police officer who I clicked with. My wife used to call him my boyfriend. And she'd look at me occasionally and say, "You're getting kind of edgy. When are you going to see your boyfriend?" Counseling probably saved my life. I know it saved my marriage and it saved my family. And it's something we don't take seriously in the fire service. If you need counseling, you're a sissy, you're a wimp, you're not a firefighter. That's BS. That's crap. You go to these calls, it affects you, it affects your community, it affects your family. If you need help, you have to go for help, and you have to get it.
Does the fact of his age, or particularly this firefighter that saw this horrific situation, matter versus somebody that's maybe been in the fire service for 20 or 30 years?
It could have an effect on him, especially coming as a volunteer. You make runs in your own community. It may be somebody that you are really close to on that run. One of the hardest is to work as a brother in the fire service or a family member. But as a volunteer, that's what you're in your own community. And he may be his first bad call.
And I think for a newer member, volunteers, we're having a tough time recruiting and retaining volunteers. You don't want to lose this kid over a horrific call. So even if you're a 20 or 30-year member, it's still going to affect you. But it might affect this younger kid who hasn't had that exposure yet. It might affect them more. So I think having the counseling available to that member, the other member who looks like he's got that 5-yard stare, doesn't know what's going on, and to any member who was at the scene, I think is critical for the department, the officer in charge, to start getting these people help. Sometimes you can have a run and everyone's going to know that after every run we should have a quick talk, what went well, what didn't go well, and everything else. But as an officer, if you have one of these really, really bad calls, you're going to know it's time to bring in the professionals. You're going to look for people having issues. You're going to look for people pulling away, people getting involved, maybe drinking too much, maybe missing things. These are things that are signs. I'm not that good at it. I don't think any of us are. That's why we're going to call in the pros.
It brought out a point of not only when you first step off the engine, where as the officer you may see those personnel right away, but what about those volunteers that may have responded to the scene in their own personal vehicles that are now driving away from there and going back to their homes? How has it affected them? So you're going to need to follow up with them as well, because it may not show right away. It may be a little ways down the road before some of these symptoms pop up.
Well, as an officer, you can look at your people. You should be able to observe and read their face and see how it's affecting them. You may have to drive to their house. But the key thing is what Mike said. We are not infallible. We're human beings. We've got to recognize that as strong and tough as we are, we need help sometimes. And it's okay to ask for help.
This concern for our firefighters' mental well-being has come to a national forefront now. And there are a lot of resources that are available to the fire departments and to individuals even. And one of the main things that the National Fallen Firefighters Foundation has come out with is the Every Time Wheels Roll program. And that is, every time the wheels roll, we do a tailboard or a kitchen debrief. It's a good learning moment. It gives a chance for the officer to evaluate the crew, see if there's any issues out there. And of course, again, just a learning moment if nothing else.
And the National Volunteer Fire Council also has help available to anybody needing that. It's another resource for volunteers.
I also think the fire service has an issue of suicides. And I think if any member of our department is talking about it or anything else, I think it's time for us to get involved and get professionals involved. And we have to be aware of those signs because it's becoming epidemic in the fire service that people are committing suicide.
And this doesn't matter whether you're paid or volunteer.
No, that's our brothers and sisters.
Right.
And you would never leave a brother or sister behind bleeding or hurt. This is the same thing. It's just not as obvious, but you have to watch for it.